Hi, and welcome to Roll the Dice. Our all things gaming webisode today is going to be on. What is it going to be on
Rules
again?
lawyering.
Rules lawyering. This is JK. This is Keith. This is the other Keith. No relation. Rules lawyering. I've got my ideas about
Well, first define
the
it.
evils of rules
Yeah,
lawyering.
we got to define it first.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I would call rules lawyering when, let's say you weaponize the rules.
Yeah.
So you spend an inordinate amount of time digging through the books, using the rules to only your advantage,
Right.
or to another player's detriment, or that sort of thing. And usually it involves a disagreement with the GM
About something.
About what's going on rules wise.
Right. And oftentimes it seems to be almost a compulsion by the players who are designated as the rule lawyer types, right?
Well, yeah, it's the whole actually
yeah.
type of person, right?
Or the accountant types, people that like to have things, in their separate columns so that everything is straight and we're going by the rules so we all know where we stand, which is the purpose of the rules, so everyone's on the even playing field.
In every group, there's one person at least who tends to be the rules lawyer.
Yeah, almost every group. Yeah. Almost every group that I've been in has been some of it. Whether that person is normally a rules lawyer or not, it will come up at times. And the biggest drawback that I see to it, other than raising the temperature of the room a little bit, people getting argumentative with each other, and it's usually just one or two or three that are involved out of, say, a 6 or 7 player game. And then it devolves down into an argument, and then there's wasting time trying to prove each other's point. And it grinds the whole scene to a halt.
Do we need an example?
Sure, make up one.
Oh, okay, so let's say you have a campaign and there's a group of adventurers, your players, and you're fighting some goblins, and you as the DM says, let's say there's a ranger in it.
Mm-hmm.
What's a power that a ranger might have?
Ranger, just, it doesn't even have to be a power. Just, they want to get an advantage on shooting at somebody through there. And
the player says, I jump up on a boulder and fire an arrow, and you say, you roll the dice, you miss. Or and he says, but wait.
Right. Or, I'm going to jump up there and I'm going to take a second shot as well. And I'm like, you can't take a second shot. And first off, jumping up on top of the boulder is going to be all of your movement. You might not be able to take the shot. And it devolves from there, right? And they might have an ability to have a bonus action and take another shot. But if the situation doesn't warrant and the GM wants a certain effect or feel to this combat, that's when it'll devolve down into, but the rules say this, therefore I should have this. And some GMs out there like to run a more free-form game. The rules are a guideline that you kind of play around in, but they're not definitive, right? And yet, for the rules lawyers out there, it's definitive. This is what should happen. This is the way it should work. It should work like this all the time, regardless of anything else.
Well, would you also not say that the rules are a social contract that we make at the beginning of this game?
Absolutely. What do you think? Yeah, agreed.
And if you build your character according to the rules, and then you can't do those things that you built him to do according to the rules, doesn't that maybe feel like you're getting cheated a bit?
Sure, and it can. The trick there is, are you getting cheated all the time? Or is it sacrificing those rules a little bit for a particular scene and a feel of the scene? We can use this as an example, the capture scenario. Players hate the capture scenario, right? They can't do anything, their hands are bound, they're chained to something, they can't do anything, but they've got these abilities that they want to be able to use. The magic user wants to be able to cast magic missile at the manacles or something like this. And I say, no, it requires both verbal and semantic gesturing. And you can't get the gestures off because your hands are manacled.
Well, I can sort of do the gestures.
Yeah, and there it goes. Yep. What does gesture mean? And then there's a 2-minute argument about that.
2 minutes?
Well, I'm being
Not
nice.
in our group.
22 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It can be something as simple as that, or it could be even more full blown about I want to get a flanking attack on this guy, but I want to do it by doing a triple backflip after running across the wall. So I want to move farther than I normally can. I want to do it with acrobatics, and I want to be able to get that free shot in the back while flanking. Okay, well there are 3 different rules at play here. Which one are you going to sacrifice to the common sense gods?
Well, now that whether you can do that or not might also really depend on what rule set you're playing.
Right.
If you're playing a much more cinematic, rules light game that really reinforces that sort of action, then you're probably not going to have as much a problem doing something like that than if you're doing a more simulationist game.
Right. And so that comes up with the contract principle you were talking about. Should there be all of these things spelled out in a house rules contract at the beginning? Because you're never going to be able to fit everything into house rules. I like 5 things in house rules. Don't argue at the table. Roll with it. We'll discuss it later. Treat each other with respect. Those are the kind of house rules that I have.
Right.
And if we start going into the minutia of, well, you can't do this ability when you're doing this, I mean, you'll end up with a huge list of shit you can't do.
There's always gray areas.
Yeah.
There will always be some gray area in every rule, right? And so who do you defer to? Do you defer to the player, or do you defer to the DM? That's really at the basis of rules lawyering, right? So
could be. Yeah. What do you think?
I think it also comes down to when do you bring up.
Right.
Now, me personally, when I'm a player, if I've got a problem with the way a rule is being adjudicated, I'll probably bring it up right then, but not in a protracted basis.
Right.
I'll just be like, I don't think the rules work that way. But, if it comes down to, hey, we're going to roll with it, we're going to roll with it.
Right. And,
maybe bring it up later, like, hey, this isn't working the way I thought it was.
Right.
That sort of thing. And, of course, I'm, never quite that reasoned in the heat of the moment. But.
Well, and as a pro GM, I'm running games with people who don't know each other. Right. And the emotional expression from gaming that gaming allows, that gaming demands of each individual player can come into conflict fairly easily because they don't know each other, and they might not be really careful with what they say, so they might bruise some feelings really quick and cause a player that was just trying to express themselves to retreat back in, and it might lose those clients, but it's not about that, it's about them not having a great game. So I've adopted here's my ruling on it, we'll discuss it after the game session, and we'll come to a concession. So I want to keep this going because I don't want that break about rules lawyering to be any more than about 20 seconds.
It stops the action.
Yeah.
It stops the action. It breaks the scene.
And
that
you're right. You
means
can really dive into it, and it can be.
It
can
start pulling
completely
out the
destroy a
manuals and
session.
flipping for the pages.
Yeah.
Well,
on page 23 it says that
I ran a game with 3 other professional DMs, and one of them knows the rules for D&D 5th edition back and forward. I know 3rd edition pretty well, 3.5 pretty well. 5th edition, I know, I've got the changes that were made in it, but by no means am I a master of 5e. So with my cinematic approach to gaming, it broke his brain. And, so we had to have that discussion, but I said, okay, well, here's how we're going to go with it right now. Luckily, one of the other DMs backed me up on it, and it's like, okay, so we'll talk about it later. And we talked about it later, and it proved that both guys that were arguing this were both wrong, and we were able to resolve this and go on with the next game. So it was a good way to handle it, I think, and I'm going to keep it that way.
I tend to be more along your lines. I think the game master's role is to keep the game moving and to keep it fun. And as soon as it breaks down into rules lawyering, you got to make a call and keep the game moving, right? The players should be good with that because they're there to have a good time too.
Right.
I would say the players have the same responsibility.
Yeah, and I disagree with one point. The GM role is not to maintain the rules and to keep the story going. The GM's role is to tell a story. that the players weave in and out of. That's their role. Their job is to herd cats, and their job is to keep the arguments about rules down to a dull roar. That's the job. That's just part of the thing that you go through. But the role of the GM is a storyteller.
Monty Cook actually spells out in the what's it called, player handbook. The game master is always right. He actually says
yes,
it.
Yes, he does. Yep.
The end of the argument is what the game master says.
Yep. Is that in the section on to be a good player?
I
so.
can't remember what
That's
section.
that's in this
Game
book
player.
here, which is the best game ever by Monty Cook Games.
No, it wasn't in that book. It was in like the handbook,
Oh, okay.
the Cipher System handbook.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So what about house rules?
Again, GM's always right. Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it devolves into chaos. I strongly believe that. But the GM needs to be fair-minded. The GM has to be kind and respectful. And if the GM is not those things, then it shouldn't go the GM is always right, right? Because he's just going to be making these rash personal decisions and inflicting them on the group rather than journeying together through the story.
And pretty soon that GM will be playing by himself.
Yes, yes, yes. I have seen games unravel because of that. And all of this kind of stems from the core idea that we're talking about with rules lawyering. There is a time to pay close attention to the rules, and there's times to wing it. Does it really matter how much D6 damage a person takes if they're falling 100 feet, right? I mean, falling down 100 feet is going to be pretty lethal. So rather than going through the book and the DM's guide for falling damage and trying to figure it out, okay, he's missed these rolls, so he's got this X dice that he's got to take, and it's this kind of a con save to mitigate the damage. I'm just going to say, make a con save, mitigate half the damage, and I'm going to say you take a quarter of your hit points, right? And you crash to the ground. That's simple, that's effective. Does it use the rules? No.
But I'm an elf.
But I'm an elf, right.
And here in the elf lore, it says we have bird bones.
Right.
So we're lighter. Plus, I have a giant cape.
Right. So I'm going to break
When I'm out. So my terminal velocity is less.
Yeah, I'd shut that one down right away. Yeah. But that would be a tough one to shut down. I'm going to be going directly head to head, nose to nose with another player. And
So now-
saying, no, I can't allow that. And they're going to ask why. And I'll say, we'll discuss it after the game.
So now what if you have a player
Mm-hmm.
who is trying to use things, let's say spells are a notorious one,
Oh, yeah.
where they're trying to use them like really in a creative way,
Mhm.
but in a way that goes against kind of the intent of the spell.
That comes down to another episode that we're going to talk about this. It comes down to, and I just lost my thought.
That's your way of saying we'll discuss it later.
Yeah, kind of. You got to go with the spirit of the spell. You got to go with the spirit of the idea, and make a rule on it quickly and move on. And then hash it out later.
In a game.
Absolutely, that's what it's all about. Expression and creativity.
Yeah, and using something in a creative but unthought of and unintended way
Right.
is kind of awesome, right?
I think so too, but using magic missile to clear the clog in the drain is not necessarily a good.
I disagree.
Good
It'll clear that.
Oh,
clog.
it'll clear it up, yeah, and destroy everything else around it. But they come up with some wacky solutions sometimes, which are hilarious, or also make you go, "How the hell did you come up with that?
Mhm.
What dark recess of your brain did we just access?" Especially if you're running dark campaigns. Things get really out of hand there. But we got anything else on
Well, there's
rules
also
learning?
those players who ignore the rules.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
Just
the opposite of rules lawyering. So you say, okay, here's the rule. You're going to have this happen to you. They're like, no, I don't think so, because once in a game, the other day,
Mhm.
we didn't bring it up, so therefore, no, that's not going to happen, right? So it happens once in a while.
Yeah. Well, you can't. A GM cannot keep everything in his head all the time. Sometimes he's just got to wing it, because to do otherwise is going to slow down the game, break the scene, you know, while he goes back and looks through his notes or your notes or whatever. And I catch myself doing this all the time. You know,
Oh.
hey, Amy, you got the super note taking going on. What happened then? And she'll look through it and access it. Meanwhile, we've broken the scene for 5 minutes. So you just got to be able to just make shit up and fly with it to maintain the good game, the perfect game, I think, which is very difficult to achieve. But again, in professional gaming, that's what they're paying for.
You
The
ever heard
perfect game every time.
You ever heard the perfect is the enemy of the good?
Oh yes, yes, absolutely. You got anything?
I think we're good.
You got anything?
Good. What do you think?
Right.
So-
Leave us some comments.
Leave a comment. Has rule lawyering interfered with your game, or have you been a rules lawyer and you disagreed with the game master, maybe for a good reason,
Mhm.
right? Leave a comment.
Yeah. Be the devil's advocate. Talk about why rules lawyering is a good thing. Let's start a discussion in YouTube, or go to my website. Roll the Dice. That's ROLE. RollTheDice.org. And yeah, right there. Thank you. And yeah, send me an email. Join up. Ask questions.
And hit follow.
And hit follow, please. Yes. All right. Have a great day.
Hi, my name's Keith, and I'm a rules lawyer.